The fighting in World War I consumed an unprecedented amount of artillery shells. Most armies had increased their stockpile of ammunition since the end of the 19th century, as artillery had become increasingly important on the battlefield. However, the war exhausted the reserves within the first year. The situation on the Western Front worsened the problem. British forces relied on heavy guns that used shrapnel shells. They were effective against troops in the open, but ineffective against them in trenches. The lack of high explosive ammunition decreased the effectiveness of British artillery. More rounds had to be fired to cause the same casualty as the enemy. Railway lines quickly delivered ammunition from the factories to the battlefield, where British artillery's high rate of fire soon depleted Britain's stockpile. The event that kicked off the shell crisis was the Battle of Aubers in 1915. The British gained no ground and suffered more than 10 times the number of casualties as the Germans. It was reported that a lack of shells, especially high explosive ones, were the reason for the defeat, and soon several newspapers blamed the shortage on the government, and especially on War Secretary Herbert Kitchener, despite having warned of the difficulty of provisioning for a long war. Pressure from inside and outside the British ministry led to the formation of a coalition government in May 1915, which stripped Kitchener of his control over munitions. While he had favored using contracts between the government and the country's arms manufacturers, his successor, Lloyd George, preferred direct control. On July 2, 1915, the Munitions of War Act was passed as a response to the shell crisis. It maximized ammunition output by bringing private companies supplying the army under the tight control of the newly created Ministry of Munitions. The law imposed strong regulations on wages, hours, and employment conditions. Workers in the affected industries could not go on strike or leave the workforce. New factories were built and railway companies were turned into ammunition manufacturers to guarantee a supply of artillery shells that the Germans were unable to match. The law was repealed in 1919, but similar legislation took effect during the Second World War.